सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणी निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशितारिणी जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंदा श्री अद्वैता गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंदा जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंदा श्री अद्वैता गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंदा जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंदा श्री अद्वैता गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंदा हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 रामा राम राम हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 रामा राम राम हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 रामा राम राम हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 रामा राम राम हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 रामा राम राम हरे हरे जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय जगद्गुरु श्रीला प्रभुपदा निताय गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल. Hare Krishna, Danatranam, dear devotees. Thank you so much for joining today to continue our reading of this beautiful scripture, Sri Brahma Samhita. And we hope that all of you had a very blissful, wonderful Janmashtami and also Srila Prabhupada's appearance day. And these are occasions which really give us a lot of energy, in our spiritual life, give us a lot of motivation. And especially Srila Prabhupada's appearance day, when we hear his glorification. Yes, we realize, his importance every day in our lives, but especially on the appearance day, when we hear so much glorification from great devotees, advanced devotees, we realize how fortunate we are that we are in this line, which Srila Prabhupada started, and Prabhupada's causeless mercy that he connected all of us in this great Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya, which has such great acharyas like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who has given us these beautiful purports of Sri Brahma Samhita. And it is indeed by Srila Prabhupada's mercy that we have access to all these great scriptures. And it should also make all of us very, very sincere in our endeavor to try and read and understand these books. So with that motivation, with that kind of happiness in our heart to be a part of this great sampradaya, let's begin our reading. So I'll just share the screen and then we'll start reading. Just a minute. So we are on Brahma Samhita 5.34. So these are the beautiful verses that I'm sure many of us are familiar with also, because we read these verses at the time of Abhishekam of the Lord. And all these verses are describing the beauty of Lord Krishna, right? As we were reading in the previous verses, we read how personal the Lord is, how wonderful the Lord is. His beauty was described. What does he wear? What kind of activities he engages in the spiritual world. All these beautiful, aspects of the Lord are being described. I'll just read the previous translation so that we know the flow. So in 5.33, Lord Brahma is praying that I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is inaccessible to the Vedas, but obtainable by pure unalloyed devotion of the soul, who is without a second, who is not subject to decay, is without a beginning, whose form is endless, who is the beginning and the eternal Purusha, yet he is a person possessing the beauty of blooming youth. So beautifully Brahmaji is describing Lord Krishna. Okay. Now let us read the 34th shloka. So Shobha Mataji, you want to read the shloka?
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam Mataji. Can I repeat with you so that I won't lose
Okay, sure, Mataji. So we'll read the shloka and then Sudha Mataji kindly read the translation. Okay, Mataji, let's go line by line. Pantastu koti shatavatsara sampragamyo.
Pantastu koti shatavatsara sampragamyo.
Vayo rathapi manaso munipungavaanam.
Vayo athapi manaso munipungavaanam.
Sopyasti yat prapadasimi avichintya tatve.
So asti yat prabhata simni avintya tatve.
Chintya tatve.
Achintya tatve. Avichintya tatve.
Govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami.
Govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami.
Hari Bol.
Hare
Thank
Krishna. Thank you,
you,
Mataji.
Thank you, Mataji. Sudha Mataji, you want to read the translation?
Yes, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Translation by His Divine Grace, Sri Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj. All glories to Maharaj. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord. Only the tip of the toe of whose lotus feet is approached by the yogis who aspire after the transcendental and betake themselves to pranayama by drilling the respiration, or by the jnanis who try to find out the non-differentiated Brahman by the process of elimination of the mundane extending over thousands of millions of years. Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji. Any other devotees who want to read the shloka?
Shloka, Mataji, that's the second one. Next one?
No, this shloka itself, Mataji.
Yeah,
You want to read?
Yeah.
You want to read? Yeah, please read.
Yeah, Mataji. Okay. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Koti satavatsara sampragamyo vayurathapi manaso munipungavaanam swapi asti yat prapadas simni avichintya tatve govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami.
Hare
Thank you,
Bol.
Mataji.
Rohini Mataji, you also want to read?
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Yes, please read.
Panthastu koti shatavatsara sampragamyo vayo rathapi manaso munipungavaanam सोऽप्यस्ति यत्प्रपदसिम्य विचिन्त्य तत्त्वे गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Rupali Mataji, you also want to read?
Yes, Mataji. Hare Krishna,
Hare
Mataji.
Krishna.
पन्तासुकोटिशत्वत्सरसम्प्रगम्यो वायोरथापि मनुषो मुनिपुङ्गवान् सोऽपि अस्ति यत्प्रपदसिंहि अविचिन्त्य तत्त्वे गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तम् अहं भजामि. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you, Mataji. Swati Mataji.
Yes, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare.
Brahma Samhita 5.34. Pantastu koti shatavatsara sampragamyo vayorasati manaso munipungavaanam sopyasyati yat prapadasimni vichindya tatte govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji. So, what is Lord Brahma talking about here? He's saying that I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, and he's saying that the tip of the toe of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, not the lotus feet, but the tip of the toe of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna is approached by the yogis who aspire after the transcendental and betake themselves to pranayam by drilling the respiration. So this is basically about the Ashtanga yogis. They are doing these kind of processes. So first about the Ashtanga yogis and then the Jnanis who try to find out the non-differentiated Brahman by the process of elimination of the mundane extending over thousands of millions of years. Okay, so this shloka is talking about what the Ashtanga yogis and the Jnanis are striving for and what is the ultimate goal that they are able to achieve. So we'll read the purport and we'll try to discuss the various points in the purport because it's a very deep purport. So we'll spend some time there. And then we'll also see a few references from other scriptures like Srimad Bhagavatam, Ishopanishad and Chaitanya Charitamrita, which will help us understand the comparison between the personal worship, the worship of the personal form of Lord Krishna versus these other paths, that is Ashtanga Yoga or Jnana Yoga. And we'll try to understand, how great bhakti is. Because as we are reading in these previous shlokas, Lord Brahma is glorifying Lord Krishna's personal form, right? He is glorifying how wonderful Lord Krishna is. Now here he is mentioning the other paths also because he's telling us to what conclusion or to what goal they are able to achieve, and then we'll see the comparison. What do Ashtanga yogis and Jnanis achieve versus what Bhakti yogis achieve? Okay, so purport by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, all glories to him. He says that the attainment of the lotus feet of Govinda consists in the realization of unalloyed devotion. So the lotus feet, in the first line itself, he is giving us a very strong point that the lotus feet of Lord Krishna can be achieved only by realization of unalloyed devotion. Okay, so Lord Krishna's lotus feet itself is so great that can be achieved only by unalloyed devotion. So anything that is an alloy means there is some mixture, right? But unalloyed devotion means it's just pure devotion, where there is no other mixture of any materialistic desires or anything for our personal satisfaction, but everything is just for the satisfaction and pleasure of Lord Krishna. So the first line itself glorifies devotion, devotional service to Lord Krishna. Then it is mentioned the Kaivalya or realized non-alternative state, which is attained by the Ashtanga yogis by practicing trance for thousands of millions of years, and the state of merging into the non-differentiated impersonality of Godhead beyond the range of limitation attained by non-dualists after a similar period, fast in distinguishing between the spiritual and non-spiritual and eliminating things of the limited sphere one after another by the formula not this, not that, are simply the outskirts of the lotus feet of Krishna and not the lotus feet themselves. So this line is talking about both the Ashtanga yogis and the Jnana yogis. So let's talk about the Ashtanga yogis first. So it is mentioned that the Kaivalya or realized non-alternative state, which is attained by the Ashtanga yogis by practicing trance for thousands of millions of years. This is the first part that is talking about the Ashtanga yogis. Now, the Ashtanga yogis, they are doing different kind of bodily postures. They are doing breath control, which is very, very difficult. Okay, but the problem is that they are appreciating the powers of the Lord. Yes, they are reaching to that extent at least, because that is why they are trying to do all this breath control and all these different bodily postures, because they are appreciating how great the Lord is. They want to attain to the effulgence of the Lord. So they are appreciating his powers, they are appreciating his potencies, but a very important thing is lacking. What is lacking is that there is no concept of service or the realization of Nitya Krishna Das, that the Jiva is a servant of Lord Krishna eternally. That is lacking. That is why this path is just taking them where? To the outskirts of the lotus feet of Krishna and not the lotus feet themselves. Okay. So these Ashtanga yogis, they are, they are accepting the form of the Lord, that the Lord is present in everyone's heart. But still, the desire to render service to Lord Krishna is not there. So they will also ultimately merge into Brahman, because, the level where one enters the spiritual planets, that will only come when one has developed a personal relationship with the Lord. When one has realized, first of all, that there is a personal form to the Lord, that the Jiva is eternally a servant of the Lord, and I have to render service to my Lord. Till that step is taken, till that upgrade has happened, the other transcendentalists, they will only go to the stage of Brahman realization. If they do not move up from just appreciation to service. So if from appreciation they don't come to the point of desiring to serve, then they will also go and merge into Brahman. Now, the level of personal service to Lord Krishna is something very, very elevated. For us, it sometimes we may not value it so much because it is so easily available, right? We are asked to chant the Lord's names. We can offer bhoga to Krishna. We see the beautiful form of the deity. We can offer flowers. We can offer fruits. We can offer water. We can cook for the deities. Now we have to understand that level of personal service, being convinced, at least theoretically, that the deity is Krishna is something that is of a very high level. And so, when we read these verses should help us realize that what we have received is something that is the topmost. Prabhupada has made it so accessible, he has made it so simple that even the children, they love deities, and they are able to appreciate deities. So that is Prabhupada's causeless mercy. But we should not take it for granted. We have to understand that the personal seva of the deity, understanding that the deity is not different than Krishna, is something of the topmost level. And the impersonalists, they are trying to merge into the impersonal aspect of the Lord. Now, whether they are Jnanis or non-dualists, impersonalists, there are different categories of Mayavadis, right? And then there are different categories of other type of transcendentalists, like there are Ashtanga yogis, there are Jnana yogis, who are very, very knowledgeable. But the problem is that through all that knowledge also, they're not coming to the state of personal service. So Brahman realization is what they will end up to. Now, the next part of this statement says that those who are, that they are in the state of merging into the non-differentiated personality of God and beyond the range of limitation, attained by non-dualists after a similar period, passing in distinguishing between the spiritual and non-spiritual and eliminating things of limited sphere. Now, this formula that is mentioned here is not this, not that. Now, this second part of the statement is talking about the Gyan yogis. Because the formula of not this, not that is what is called as the Neti Neti formula. You might have heard that. And this is mentioned in the Upanishads. Now, what this formula actually is that you analyze whatever you see, whatever you perceive, you analyze that is this, in this material world, is this spiritual or is this material? And you eliminate all the material things. And then what is left is Brahman. Okay, so Neti Neti, not this, not that. This is not Brahman, this is not Brahman. In this way, the elimination process goes on, and then finally one is expected to achieve the stage of Brahman. For example, giving a very gross example, if someone sees a tree, then one analyzes this tree, that okay, this tree is not Brahman. Why is it not Brahman? Because it is not eternal, it is not absolute, it is temporary. This tree can only produce another similar tree. For example, from a banyan tree can only come a banyan tree, not a banana tree or any other kind of a tree. So it cannot produce anything else. So in this way, seeing that it is not eternal, it is not absolute, it is just temporary, seeing all these categories, characteristics, one understands that this tree is material, this tree is not Brahman. In the same way, all the elements, earth, water, air, fire, ether, everything is analyzed, the mind, senses, everything, every single thing we see, we analyze it, and then we understand that none of this is Brahman. None of this is absolute. So that is Neti Neti, Neti Neti, that keeps on going. So by eliminating all material aspects, you are supposed to remain. Finally, you will remain with pure spiritual aspect as a realization. So that is the process they follow. So now this process, we understand, we can make out that this is not a devotional process, right? Because it's a very indirect and it is a very negative way of achieving the Supreme Lord, right? Like saying this is not God, this is not God. And then finally in that way, we try to achieve Lord. And this is also a very difficult way because we are describing the negative aspect and not the positive aspect. We are saying what is not Brahman, but we are not saying that what is Brahman. So what is Brahman and how do we know that? It's like, for example, a child is taught to cross the road on the zebra crossing. And we tell the child that, okay, you see there is a separate light that is blinking, and that light, when it blinks at a particular point, in a particular color, that is when you are supposed to cross the zebra crossing. But that light is not yellow and that light is not red. So it is a very indirect way of saying. We are not telling the child that you just cross when that pedestrian crossing light is green. Instead of saying that, we are saying that, oh, you cross only when the light is not yellow, when the light is not red. So it is an indirect way and it is difficult also. The Mayavadis, Gyanis, they adopt this method. And this is also called as the path of Aroha Pantha. That means we are believing that by our own ability, we will be able to understand God. Because we are using our analytical thinking, our strength to differentiate between what is material and what is spiritual. And by analyzing things in this way, we'll be able to understand Brahman. This is the path that they are following. Now, these people, when we are reading about these kind of transcendentalists, they are not ordinary materialistic people. See, because they are people who have controlled their minds. They are not gross materialists who are engaged in sense gratification. They are not people who are engaged in the normal mundane affairs of this world. Because see, here it is mentioned that they are practicing trance for thousands of millions of years. So someone who is able to practice trance is the stage of samadhi. So if someone is able to practice trance or any kind of such spiritual path for thousands of years, we have to understand that they are not ordinary people. Because if we see in today's world, then how many people can actually control their minds? It is something that, we are all battling with, right? And that is causing so many problems around the world. This problem of controlling the mind. The mind is just taking us here, there, everywhere, making us do so many things that we would not have done otherwise. And it is our mind that really causes so much of problem when we are trying to chant or when we are trying to focus on our reading or any kind of spiritual path. So controlling the mind is not an easy feat. But these transcendentalists, they are engaged in controlling the mind. They have realized that they are not this body. How many people in this world have realized that they are not this body? Mostly is, if we see the majority, everyone is engaged in just doing things for the satisfaction of their body, doing things that will give even momentary pleasure to the body. So, these are all very difficult things that they are doing, controlling the mind, realizing that they are not this body. And how many people can do meditation today, which is a Satya Yuga process? Meditation, even for a few minutes, sitting alone in one place, focusing our mind on one thing is so difficult. That is why we face so many challenges, right? But the Gyan yogis, these Ashtanga yogis, they are people who have controlled their mind. They have realized they are not this body. They are able to do meditation for thousands of millions of years. And it is mentioned that they are practicing trance. So they have achieved the samadhi, which is the level of Ashtanga yoga. So we have to understand that they are actually very big yogis. We should not take them lightly. They are, and we cannot compare them with the normal materialistic people that are there in the world. They are very, very big yogis. And thousands of years they have put into such kind of practice. But even after all this, what do they achieve? They achieve simply the outskirts of the lotus feet of Krishna and not the lotus feet themselves. So the Jnanis, Ashtanga yogis, they come to the outskirts of the lotus feet of Krishna. Now, what is this outskirt of the lotus feet of Krishna? That is actually the effulgence of Krishna's lotus feet, the Brahma Jyoti. So here in this regard, let's read this shloka from Srimad Bhagavatam. This is Lord Shiva praying, and then he says that, "My dear Lord, your lotus feet are so beautiful that they appear like two blossoming petals of the lotus flower, which grows during the autumn season. Indeed, the nails of your lotus feet emanate such a great effulgence that they immediately dissipate all the darkness in the heart of a conditioned soul. My dear Lord, kindly show me that form of yours which always dissipates all kinds of darkness in the heart of a devotee. My dear Lord, you are the supreme spiritual master of everyone. Therefore, all conditioned souls covered with the darkness of ignorance can be enlightened by you as the spiritual master." Now, who is praying like this? This is Lord Shiva. That should fill our heart with so much awe that, oh my God, Lord Shiva is praying like this, and he is describing the bodily features of the Lord. And Prabhupada says in the purport that he is describing the bodily features of the Lord authoritatively. He is the authority, right? He has seen the Supreme Lord, so he can describe the bodily features of Lord Krishna. And he wants to see the lotus feet of the Lord. So just imagine what is the position of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, that even Lord Shiva is desiring to get the darshan of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. And here, so this part that I have highlighted, Lord Shiva is saying that indeed the nails of your lotus feet emanate such a great effulgence that they immediately dissipate all the darkness in the heart of a conditioned soul. So the lotus feet of Lord Krishna emanate great effulgence. And that is the effulgence which is mentioned here as the outskirts of the lotus feet of Krishna. Okay, so this means that the Jnanis, Ashtanga yogis who are engaged in this kind of meditation, they achieve the Brahma Jyoti liberation. They go and merge into the Brahma Jyoti of Lord Krishna, into the effulgence of Lord Krishna. This is what they are able to get with so much effort, with realizing that they are not this body, with controlling the mind, with doing meditation for thousands of millions of years. They are able to merge into the Brahma Jyoti. They are able to get into the effulgence of Lord Krishna. They are not able to actually achieve the Lord. They are not able to actually achieve the service of the Lord or realize God. That is something that is not accessible to them. Okay. So this is the position that is mentioned for the Jnanis and the Ashtanga Yogis. Now the next part of the purport. The long and short of the matter is this. Kaivalya, or merging into the Brahman, constitutes the line of demarcation between the world of limitation and the transcendental world. So, Kaivalya, or this merging into the Brahman, where does this take them? Where will they go? They will go to the border of the spiritual and the material worlds. Okay, so this line of demarcation, that means the border between the world of limitation. World of limitation means the material world, and the transcendental world. Transcendental world means the spiritual world. So this Brahma Jyoti, where they go, is the border between the material and the spiritual world. And unless, here next part is, for unless we step beyond them, we can have no taste of the variegatedness of the transcendental sphere. So unless we cross the Brahma Jyoti, we cannot have the taste of the varieties. Now, what varieties? There is so much variety in the spiritual world. There is variety in the forms of Lord Krishna. See, because there are so many different forms of Lord Krishna that are worshipped by devotees. You can worship Lord Ram, one can be very attached to Lord Narasimhadev, one can be very attached to Lord Chaitanya, and one can be attached to the personal form of Lord Krishna also. And for Lord Krishna also, there are different stages in Lord Krishna's life, right? He's a baby, sometimes he's a boy 5 years old, he's a boy 10 years old, he's 15. In this way, there are so many different stages in Lord Krishna also, and different devotees are attracted to different age of Krishna also. Like for some, Lord Krishna is just a child. They want to worship him as their Lala. For some, he's their best friend. For some, he's the master. For some, he's the supreme Lord that they just want to serve. For some devotees may have the Madhurya Bhav. So Lord Krishna is present in all these different forms in the spiritual world. So there is so much variety in terms of the form of Lord Krishna. So much variety in terms of the planets of Lord Krishna, because every form of Lord Krishna has a different planet. So His Grace Amarendra Prabhu was once saying that if someone is attached to worshipping Lord Krishna as the 1-year-old, then they will go to one special planet where Krishna is always 1-year-old. They are always worshipping Lord Krishna in that baby form. Then different stages of Lord Krishna's pastimes. Now, pastimes of the Lord also are then, there's so much variety. There are so many pastimes of Lord Krishna as a baby. Then as he grows, then he starts stealing butter. Then he's stealing the clothes of the gopis. Then as he grows up, there are pastimes with the gopas, with the gopis. So unlimited number of pastimes. And even the incarnations of Lord Krishna, there are so many incarnations, right? We just hear of the 10 incarnations, but there are unlimited incarnations of Lord Krishna, right? So all of them have their different planets where devotees worship them. So there is so much variety in terms of the planets. There's so much variety in terms of the pastimes. So much variety in terms of associates of the Lord also. Associates of Lord Krishna. There are so many devotees of Lord Krishna who worship the Lord in different bhavas, right? In different moods. And obviously, if we see the beauty of the spiritual planets and the kind of services that are offered to the Lord, there is unlimited amount of variety. So that is what is mentioned here, that unless we step beyond them, we can have no taste of the variegatedness of the transcendental sphere. So there is so much variegatedness in the transcendental world, in the spiritual world, but unless one goes beyond this boundary, that is, unless one goes beyond the Brahma Jyoti, one is not able to get a taste of the variegatedness. Okay. Now, the stage of Brahman realization. Why do some people aspire for it? We may question that, oh, it is just at the boundary, it is not actually going beyond. Then why would some people aspire for it? That question may arise. No, that is aspired for because that is a stage where there is absence of misery. Now, in this material world, I'm sure all of us have experienced a good experience of misery, right? There is unlimited ways in which misery can come. Like His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj says that a small finger, our pinky finger, in what ways can it give us pleasure? Okay, we can take help of the finger to lift something, maybe to eat something, or we can put some nice jewel on it and get pleasure from that. But there are very few ways in which we can get pleasure from our pinky finger. But we can all imagine that there are so many ways in which our pinky finger can give us misery. If a thorn comes and pricks it, or we cut it with a knife, or if the nail comes out, or if the skin comes out, or there are different ways in which the finger can give us misery, right? There's so many points on the finger. If someone hits it, or I bang it somewhere, anything can happen. The bone can break. So many ways in which this small finger can give us misery. So that is why some people just want freedom from this misery. So when you realize Brahman, what do you get? You get to a state where I realize that I'm not a part of the material world. I am free from this Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi, and I don't have to suffer. That is why it is the aspiration for a number of people, because there is absence of misery. But because one is not engaged in devotional service, we don't get ananda. Yes, there is an absence of misery, so there is some feeling of peace. But that ananda, that spiritual joy is not there because we are not engaged in serving the Lord personally. So that bliss is not there. Now, absence of misery cannot be constituted the same as happiness, right? Happiness is something which is beyond absence of misery. For example, once this example was given by His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, and it is a very personal example which will help all of us understand. For example, siblings, they get into a fight. And then, the fight goes really ugly, so they are both miserable, and then they decide, okay, let's just not talk to each other. Okay, you go in that room, I go in my room, and we'll not talk to each other. So then that misery of fight is gone, right? They are not fighting anymore. But this is not happiness also, right? It is just absence of misery, but not happiness. So after a while, they will both realize that this is actually very boring here. Let's forget about the fight. Let's talk. Because when they talk, when they are with each other, then they have a good time, then that's when they are feeling happy. So through this materialistic example, this is helping us understand that just the absence of misery, that state where we are free from misery is not equal to pleasure. The pleasure comes in serving the Lord. The pleasure comes in a personal relationship. Like when the siblings, they patch up and then they are experiencing the joy of each other's company. That's happiness. So the Brahmananda, the joy of Brahman, that is a state where misery is not there, but it is much lower than Premananda. And it is actually mentioned by devotees that Brahmananda is compared to the quantity of water in a calf's hoof print. And Premananda, the love, the joy of love, that is compared to the ocean of love of God. So if we compare the water in a calf's hoof print with an ocean, we can imagine the difference, right? That is the difference between Brahmananda and Premananda. And why is Brahmananda not giving us the extreme joy, the highest joy? Because that is not our constitutional position. Our constitutional position is of Jivera Swarubhai, Krishna Nitya Das. And who has told us this? This has been told to us by the Supreme Lord Himself. It is not that someone has in the material world has concocted this position. No, Lord Chaitanya has himself told us, Jivera Swarupahai Krishnera Nitya Das, Krishnera Tathastha Shakti Veda Veda Prakash. The Lord says that it is the living entity's constitutional position to be an eternal servant of Krishna because he is the marginal energy of Krishna and a manifestation simultaneously one with and different from the Lord, like a molecular particle of sunshine or fire. Krishna has three varieties of energy. So here it is mentioned that it is the living entity's constitutional position to be an eternal servant of Krishna. So when we are in Brahmananda, yes, we are in a neutral state, but we are not in a state which is our actual state of serving the Lord. And that is why there is no Ananda. So then what happens to these people who are going and merging into the Brahma Jyoti? So they finally are in a state where they are free from misery. Like here it is mentioned that these conditions are the simple absence of misery arising from mundane affinity, but are not of real happiness or felicity. So here it is mentioned that if the absence of misery be called a bit of pleasure, then also that bit is very small and of no consequence. So this again, that comparison between Brahmananda and Premananda is given. That if someone says that no, for me, absence of misery itself is pleasure, then okay, even if you call that pleasure, then also this pleasure is very, very small and of no consequence because it is very, very, very minute compared to the Premananda. It is not sufficient to destroy the condition of materiality, but the real gain to the jiva is his eternal existence in his self-realized state. Now, why is it mentioned that this ananda of Brahman realization? Why is it not sufficient to destroy the condition of materiality? Because even the souls who are achieving Brahman realization, because that is not our ultimate state, our natural state of being. Prabhupada also says this, that the jiva there feels lonely, like the siblings feel lonely away from each other. Yes, there is absence of misery, but they feel lonely because there is no relationship, there is no loving exchange, there is no pleasure of bhakti, and there is no concept of giving pleasure to the Lord. That is why there is loneliness. So then what happens to such souls? They come back again. They come back to the material world again, and then they take birth as philanthropists. They engage in great social work because their consciousness is definitely elevated, right? So they do good work, but they are again back into this world. That is why it is not sufficient to destroy the condition of materiality. And then it is mentioned by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur that the real gain to the jiva is his eternal existence in his self-realized state. Self-realized state means understanding that I am a servant of Krishna, and that is our eternal existence. That is actually the real gain. The real gain to the jiva is for us in our eternal existence, in our self-realized state of being a servant of Krishna. And how can that be attained? This can be attained only by the grace of unalloyed devotion, which is essentially chit or transcendental in character. This state where we are completely realizing ourselves, where we are completely realizing who we are, can only be attained by bhakti. Just give me one moment, please. Hare Krishna, really sorry for the disturbance. I'm sorry. Yeah. So it is mentioned here that the stage of Premananda can be attained only by unalloyed devotional service, which is essentially Chit or transcendental in character. In Bhagavad Gita 2.40 also we have read, right, that whatever devotional service one performs, that never goes in vain. Even a little elevation on this path can protect one from the greatest type of fear. So whatever bhakti that we are doing is forever, it never gets out of our spiritual account. It is always going to be there. And that is why it is mentioned that unalloyed devotion is essentially chit or transcendental in character. And when one engages in this kind of a service, then we are able to attain the real thing, the real gain, which is our eternal existence in the self-realized state. For this end, abstract and uninteresting mental speculation is of no avail. So mental speculation, this kind of speculation that, oh, is this Brahman? Is this not Brahman? Or where is this? What is this? Is this spiritual? Is this not spiritual? Or just analyzing mentally is of no avail, and it is also mentioned here as uninteresting because it is uninteresting compared to the personal service of Lord Krishna. This is a very indirect path and it is uninteresting also. Now when we are engaging in the personal worship, the worship of the personal form, then there are so many avenues for us, right? There is cooking, there is serving the deities, there is offering of bhoga, there is deity worship, there is reading of scriptures, there is chanting, there is sankirtan, there are japa marathons, then there is service to devotees and temple worship, home worship. There are so many, the list is just endless, right? There are so many ways in which one can serve the Lord. And reading these wonderful scriptures also, isn't it interesting as we are reading line by line and we are trying to understand each line? Each line is filled with so much of knowledge, it's packed with knowledge. But when we are reading this with a motive of developing love for Lord Krishna, it becomes very interesting. It's not dry mental speculation, because our acharyas are so kind and so merciful that they always keep bringing us back to the right point of focus. Like Prabhupada, when he's teaching us Bhagavad Gita also, people sometimes criticize that why is he talking about bhakti when the verse is not talking about bhakti? Because Prabhupada wants to help us keep our focus. Because Lord Krishna is saying in the end that you leave everything and surrender unto me. So Prabhupada is helping us maintain our focus. That ultimately this is where you need to be. You need to focus on Lord Krishna. You need to focus and surrender to Krishna. You have to engage in the path of bhakti. So they keep bringing us back. They make it so direct and easy for us. Otherwise, in these big, big words, we can get lost. But by their mercy, they keep bringing us back. They help us understand that how the worship of Lord Krishna is very, very personal, how the Lord is very, very personal. And Prabhupada, through his personal example, and even Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, through their example, they teach us that everything can be used in the service of Lord Krishna. And whatever is used in the service of Lord Krishna becomes spiritual. Okay, so through this shloka, we are understanding that if we are talking about the Ashtanga Yoga process, if we are talking about the Jnana Yoga process, then it is very, very difficult because we are relying on our own effort. We are thinking that by our own effort, we can, achieve God. But through this shloka, we are learning that by our own effort, even after millions or trillions of years, we can't realize the Lord personally. Okay, all we can get to is the outskirts of the lotus feet of Krishna and not the lotus feet themselves. Okay, and so it is explained here that the real gain can be attained only by the grace of unalloyed devotion, which is essentially Chit or transcendentalist in character. So this shloka is really highlighting the importance of the seva of the personal form of the Lord, unalloyed devotional service to Lord Krishna. That is really coming out very strongly because we are understanding that through which one is able to attain something
that cannot be achieved even by practicing trance for thousands of millions of years. So that is how great devotional service to Lord Krishna is. Now there's another reference to Srimad Bhagavatam, which is Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.11. In this shloka, it is mentioned that learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagwan. Okay, so these three aspects of God realization or realization of the absolute truth are mentioned. And Prabhupada mentions in the purport that the absolute truth is both subject and object, and there is no qualitative difference there. Therefore, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagwan are qualitatively one and the same. And he says that the same substance is realized as impersonal Brahman by the students of Upanishads, as localized Paramatma by the Hiranyagarbhas or the yogis, and as Bhagwan by the devotees. So he's talking about the three levels of God realization. Then what does he say? Bhagwan, or the personality of Godhead, is the last word of the absolute truth. So this Bhagwan realization, or the realization of the personal form of Lord, is the ultimate realization. He says that Paramatma is the partial representation of the personality of Godhead, and impersonal Brahman is the glowing effulgence of the personality of Godhead, as the sun rays are to the sun god. So here again we are learning that Paramatma is a representation of the Lord, and Brahman is this effulgence. And then what does Prabhupada say? He says, less intelligent students of either of the above schools sometimes argue in favor of their own respective realization. But those who are perfect seers of the absolute truth know well that the above three features of the one absolute truth are different perspective views seen from different angles of vision. So Prabhupada here makes it very clear that the Bhagwan realization is the last word. That is the highest form of realization of the absolute truth. Because there are some people, who have even told me that, initially we need to worship a form of the Lord, but after the devotion reaches a certain stage, then one doesn't need any form. One can just focus on the light of God. That is a very wrong understanding. And if we really go and read our scriptures and read Prabhupada's purports, that helps us understand that Paramatma realization is the realization of a representation of the Lord. Brahman realization is going and merging in the effulgence of the Lord. But beyond these two is the Bhagwan realization, or realization of the personal form of the Lord. Even if we read Sri Ishopanishad, in this 15th verse of Sri Ishopanishad, there are many different references that Srila Prabhupada gives, where he's talking about the dazzling effulgence of Lord Krishna. So this verse itself says that, "O my Lord, sustainer of all that lives, your real face is covered by your dazzling effulgence. Kindly remove that covering and exhibit yourself to your pure devotee." Now this shloka itself, 15th shloka of Sri Ishopanishad, Hiranmayena Patrena, this shloka is very important for us to remember, because here it is clearly mentioned. People always say that, scripture, reference to scriptures and all that. So here there is reference to Upanishad. Sri Ishopanishad is saying that your face, your real face is covered by your dazzling effulgence. That means the effulgence of the Lord is not the ultimate realization. There is a real face beyond that. And this effulgence is covering that real face, and the devotee is praying that please remove this covering. Your effulgence is covering, remove this, and please exhibit yourself to your pure devotee. This clearly mentions. And then this reference from Bhagavad Gita 14.27, where it is mentioned that I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal, and is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness. So Lord Krishna is the basis of the impersonal Brahman. So impersonal Brahman is coming from Lord Krishna. So Lord Krishna is immortal, imperishable, he is eternal, and he is where our ultimate happiness lies. Then again 10.42, where Lord Krishna says that, but what need is there, Arjuna, for all this detailed knowledge? With a single fragment of myself, I pervade and support this entire universe. So here again, the Lord is mentioning about his impersonal aspect. So that is one aspect of Krishna, because through that, he is pervading and supporting the entire universe. Okay, and so that is also, what is that? That is a single fragment of myself. Krishna is saying it is a single fragment. So this again mentions the superiority of the personal form of Lord Krishna. And then Srimad Bhagavatam 10, 12, 11, where Shukadev Goswami says that the personality of Godhead, who is perceived as the impersonal, blissful Brahman by the Jnanis, who is worshipped as a supreme Lord by devotees in the mood of servitorship, and who is considered an ordinary human being by mundane people, played with the cowherd boys who had attained their position after accumulating many pious activities. So the impersonalist people, impersonalistic philosophers, they perceive of him as the blissful Brahman, or the Jnanis. But these cowherd boys who have accumulated many pious activities, they are able to see the personal form of Krishna, play with the personal form of Lord Krishna. And then the Lord pervades the entire material creation by his plenary part, known as Paramatma or Super Soul. So that is also a part of Lord Krishna. So in this way, we are understanding through these various references, like this Bhagavad Gita 14:27, and this again, a Brahma Samhita reference is also there. The shloka is yet to come. That the Lord is present in every corner of the universe as Brahma Jyoti, as his presence. But these are all the personal rays of the Supreme Personality of Govinda, whom Brahmaji is worshipping. So the personal rays of Lord Krishna. Okay. And then Mundaka Upanishad, again, this reference that in the spiritual realm, beyond the material covering, is the unlimited Brahman effulgence, which is free from material contamination. That effulgent white light is understood by transcendentalists to be the light of light. And the description that there is no need for any mundane kind of source of illumination is also mentioned. And the Supreme Brahman effulgence spreads throughout both the material and spiritual skies. Okay. So these references are again and again telling us that the worship of the Paramatma feature or the worship of the Brahman feature, there is something beyond that, and that is the devotion of the personal form of Lord Krishna. Okay. And the last part, Prabhupada is saying that in the Bhagavad Gita, 6th chapter, there is a comparative analysis of the 3 types of transcendentalists, that is the worshippers of the Brahman or, the Paramatma feature or the Yubhaktas is mentioned. And then it is mentioned that what is the ultimate goal? And of all the mystic yogis, he who follows Bhakti Yoga, constantly engaging in the service of the Lord, is the highest. And Sri Ishopnisha directs us towards this perfection. So the understanding from all these different references that we read today, and also from this particular shloka, is that the goal achieved by the Bhakti Yogi is the highest. Even if one is engaged for thousands of millions of years in practicing trance, they can only achieve the Brahman effulgence, that is the outskirts of the lotus feet of Krishna, not the lotus feet themselves. And the lotus feet of Govinda, who can achieve that consists in the realization of unalloyed devotion. So by bhakti of Lord Krishna, one can achieve the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. One can achieve personal service of Lord Krishna. Okay, so that summarizes this shloka that we read today. If there are any questions or comments or any points of discussion.
Mataji, Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much for the nice class, Mataji. Mataji, I was wondering, though it is given in the Vedas since long time that the personal form of the Lord is there, why?
Mataji, you're not audible. She got dropped. Any other Questions?
Hare Krishna Mataji, it's not a question. I just want a reference of in Srimad Bhagavatam, you said Lord Shiva is glorifying Lord Krishna. Can you give me the reference of that sloka, Mataji, Srimad Bhagavatam?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, Mataji, that shloka is 4th canto,
Yeah.
24th chapter, verse number 52.
4:52, right?
4:24:52.
Okay, 4:24.
4:24:52.
Okay, thank you, Mataji. Then pranam.
Dhanvatanama.
Hare Krishna Mataji, I had asked one question.
Yes,
Was it not audible?
No,
Mataji?
I'm not able to hear you. Please tell me, Mataji.
Dandavat pranams Mataji. Mataji, it's given in the Vedas since long time that personal form of the Lord is there. But why the yogis and the jnanis are not accepting Mataji? What is the reason?
Yeah, Mataji, there is a different level of advancement for everyone. There is a different level to which one can understand things. That is why the Vedas give so many different things, right? They also talk about karma yoga. They give so many different yajna, sacrifices, and all these things. Because everyone's consciousness has not reached that level where they are able to accept this position of personal worship of Lord Krishna. That is why these different paths are given, so that at least in some way or the other one is connected to the transcendental path. Even when there is karma yoga description, there is the hope that by doing some kind of karma yoga or yajna, at least some goodness is developed in a person, and they are able to then ultimately come to the path of bhakti. So there are actually yogis and jnanis who were on the Mayavadi path or who were on the impersonal path. But then, when they meet devotees or when they get some taste of devotional service or they hear about the Leela of Lord Krishna, or in some way they get some taste of this, then they do change their path. So that also happens, Mataji. So it's not that if one is on the impersonal path, they continue to remain there. There are examples when such changes happen. But those different paths are given because everyone's consciousness is of a different level, and not everyone can directly come to the personal worship.
Oh, thank you, Mataji.
Thank you.
Very nice. Dandavat.
Okay. Okay, so if there are no other questions, then we'll close for today. All glories to Shri Brahma Samhita. And please forgive me if I made any mistakes. All glories to Srila Prabhupada and our great Acharya or Parampara who have given us these wonderful scriptures. And thank you all so much for your attentive hearing. Vanchakalpatrubhyascha kripasindhubhyaivacha patitanam pavanebhyo Shri Vaishnavebhyo namo namah Anantkoti Vaishnavin ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki jai. Shri Brahma Samhita ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you, dear devotees. Thank you so much. Dhanvat pranams.
Hare Krishna Mataji,
Hare
Dandavat
Krishna
pranam.
Mataji, Dandavat pranam.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam. Thank you.